I'm just really excited to talk to you because we're just going to dive in here. You're one of the, when I think of all the people I've interviewed, you're one of the people that comes up in my mind as someone who's on a friggin' mission. I mean, you exude it. And I'll let you respond to that after I read your bio. All right, so folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have back Shari Botwin. Shari, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back again.
You are welcome. So Shari has been counseling survivors in recovery from all types of trauma in her Cherry Hill, New Jersey private practice for over 25 years. Her second book, Thriving After Trauma, Stories of Living and Healing, deals with overcoming trauma, including physical and sexual abuse, war-related injury, loss due to tragedy or illness, and natural disasters. Real stories and practical tools shed light on how to let go of the shame, guilt, anger, and despair after a traumatic experience. An updated version of her first book, Thriving After Trauma, released worldwide in October of 2021. Shari has conducted keynote presentations all over the place, including for Advanced Recovery Systems, Stockton University, Rutgers University. She's appeared on the NBC Nightly News, The Today Show. Jesus. She also hosts a co-hosts a podcast called Warrior Women Speak with Judge Rosemary Aquilina. She's also published feature articles in Thrive Global, Medium, Philadelphia Inquirer, and Toronto Star. You're on a mission.
I am on such a mission. And it's so funny that you're bringing this up today, because just yesterday, when I saw that you wanted me to come on the show, I was coming out of the show Hamilton. I don't know if you're familiar with the show.
Sure.
But there is the main character, Alexander Hamilton, he is such a go-getter. The part of the theme of the musical is about going after what you want and not letting anything get in your way. And as I'm going through the show, I can feel what they're talking about in the musical. And all morning I've been thinking about that part of me that says, no matter what anybody says or does, I am going to keep doing what I want to be doing and what I need to be doing. It's so much what kept me fighting through so many years of trauma. And it's such a big part of who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Well, say more about that need. I know we touched upon this the first time we spoke, but when did that need announce itself?
It started showing up when I was around 10 years old, not because I understood what was going on, but because I knew that I was not okay. And I knew that I did not have what I needed in terms of support and relationship. And at that age, that's when I started thinking about ending my life. So what happened was, I think that part of my brain that said, but you have your whole future ahead of you. You're going to
At
be
what age? I'm sorry. What age?
10.
10.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And it's funny because my kid just turned 11. So I've been watching him a lot these last couple years. I watched that part of him that is fiercely determined and so present and full of life. And I think he so much reminds me of myself, but the difference is he's not fighting a war of trauma. He's living the life of a kid who happens to be athletic and competitive and empathic. So it's very interesting for me to see the differences. But it was around the age of 10 when I really was struggling with peers. I was getting bullied. People were telling me that this world would be better off without me. And sometimes I felt like, well, maybe that's true. Maybe I shouldn't be here. But then I don't know how, but this other part of me kicked in and said, well, yeah, but you're not going to be a kid forever. And you've got things you need to do. You've got things you need to tell. And I knew I was never going to watch what happened to me to other kids. I knew as an adult, somehow I have to serve as an advocate or as somebody who does outreach. And having those goals and dreams or aspirations, that's part of what kept me fighting.
That's so incredible. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, and sad for me to hear that at 10 years old, you were thinking about taking your own life, that to me is incomprehensible. And then to turn around and uh, feel that life force within you saying, no, 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 no. I've got to do something. That to me is just incredible. When you're talking to people, I mean, I know this is you're writing books and you're talking. Um, when you're talking to someone, and I don't know if you can think of a particular person. Obviously you don't have to say a name or anything, but what do you want to say to them? What do you want to hopefully transmit to them?
Just 2 hours ago, I was talking to somebody who was also abused by her father, and she's around the same age as me. She's got kids. She has not figured out how to integrate that what happened to her actually happened to her. She still
Mm-hmm.
is dissociated from that part of her. So we were talking today about how she really wants to integrate that piece of her. She doesn't want that to be a part. She wants that younger part of her to be part of her daily life. And what I said to her was, let's talk about why that would be good for you. Let's talk about the benefits in letting yourself know on all levels, because this stuff is so painful even when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, however old you are. When you're facing trauma, if you don't have a reason or a goal or something to look for on the other end, then why bother? So
Mm-hmm.
I actually was working very hard today to try to say to her, this is what I think will help you to get to that point. And I did share with her. I talked to her about when my therapist used to say things to me like, well, why are we doing this work? Why do you think you're feeling all this pain? People don't come to therapy and feel the kind of pain you feel and not have a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
That helped me. That was when I would think to myself, why am I doing this? Because I want a family, because I want to tell people what happened to me, because I want to be safe, because I want to be free in my body. I don't want to have an eating disorder anymore. And at one point, I made a vision board for myself and my therapist, and it's still in her office. When I see her occasionally, it's still there. Pictures of dogs, kids, dancers, because I love to dance. I love Broadway. Um, Men, because I want to trust men, all this stuff. And that's what I was trying to talk to this woman about today, about the reason, the benefits of facing trauma, and the amazing gifts that can come out of looking at our deepest, darkest, painful moments.
When she walked into your office for the first time, I mean, and that in and of itself is a huge win, right? For someone to just to get into a therapist's office, because at some point you're saying, I need help. Where was she in terms of being able to hear you say these things?
It's a great question. So we just met not that long ago, and very sadly, and it's very sad, but her former therapist passed away suddenly. So this is somebody who already has an extensive history with abandonment and trauma and dissociation. So she's not meeting me by choice. She's meeting me because she knows she needs to stay in therapy. But now she, on top of working through her trauma, has to work through the loss of her therapist. So when you ask me, where is she? When I'm meeting her, I'm meeting somebody who I think is determined, and she's a hard worker, and she had been spending years in therapy. She's also very hurt, and she's in a state of grieving. And I think when we lose somebody who has done well by us, that's when we really know what we were missing in our own families. So that's some of what she's having to confront. We talk about how the loss of her therapist, in some ways, it's like she's revisiting the loss of her mom, but the mom that she wanted versus the mom that she actually has.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, intense to say the least. Um, when you
She's not
started,
going to quit though.
right, right, you can
She's
feel that within her too. Let me shift gears a little. Shari. And when you started studying, and when you at some point said in some way to yourself, I want to kind of help others learn or learn about, heal from trauma, what path did you go down in terms of your studies, your education? What helped you?
What helped me was going to therapy a million times a week, pretty much.
A million times.
I mean, yeah, I like did reading. I went to conferences. I was working in the field of eating disorders. And as we know, most people who have eating disorders have experienced some type of trauma, not necessarily abuse. But to be honest with you, I didn't do a lot of studying. I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of writing and journaling. And I did a lot of making sense of my history and also incorporating the work that I was doing in my office and learning from other people's experiences. So I think for me, it's been about life experiences. And a lot of the training that I've had is really about going off between those sessions and gaining insight and understanding into the impact of abuse, the role of shame, the grief that comes with knowing what was done to us to
Mm.
be able to actually live it. I think I was talking to a colleague about this a few months ago, and I can't remember exactly what she said to me, but we were talking about my clinical skills, and she said, what makes you the therapist that you are is that you live it. You literally live it, because I'll reach out to people and say, gosh, I had lots of flashbacks. Yesterday I had a ton of flashbacks when we left the theater, between the messages in the show and also just being in New York for the first time since before COVID. New York was the place I went to escape from my history, from my family. Broadway was my dream.
Mm.
Being on stage saved my life in so many ways, because I didn't have to be living in my house. I could live in another character's body. And that's what you do when you act. And as I was sitting through the show, I was in the show, then I was having flashbacks of being on the stage,
Wow.
having flashbacks of experiencing some awful experiences. I had a miscarriage while I was performing at the age of 16, while I was on the stage. And I remember thinking, nobody helped me. Nobody, I had to perform. I mean, it was horrible. I was having a miscarriage. So we all know what that's like. That's pretty messy. And I remember just hearing the choreographer say, you have to get back out there. You got to get back out there. There were no understudies. I remember thinking in that next scene, because I was one of the leads in that show, I remember thinking, I would never, ever, ever do this to anybody else. Somebody needs to help me right now. And instead, they're telling me, get the hell back on the stage. Do you know the next day I lost my voice? I could not, literally could not speak. I got so sick. I think from the miscarriage and the trauma, I developed a really bad virus. By the closing night, I had absolutely no voice. And I remember thinking, this is not okay. If something bad happens to somebody when they're growing up, it doesn't matter that it's a show. You take the show and you close it down and you get the ambulance. My parents were sitting in the audience. They were in the audience. And
Mm.
those are the moments that I remember when I go to the theater. I remember, how did you get through that? And honestly, being on the stage is part of what helped me get through it, because I could be in another role. I didn't have to be Shari Botwin having a miscarriage. I was Frenchie in Greece. I don't know if you can picture that, but
I can picture that there. And I think that's one of the things that I don't know, really, I really admire about you and find very inspiring is you have this just way of being that you can feel it. You exude this uh, uh, genuineness and authenticity that is so, we know, is so vital in connecting with another person. Um, was that something that just came naturally for you? Was that way of working with people, it, it did you have to struggle to get there, or what?
I mean, I was always really afraid of people, but at the same time, I loved people. So what I did from probably around the same age, around the age of 10, was I looked for people who felt safe, mostly adults, sometimes people who could be big brothers, big sisters, which I got a lot in the theater, but I looked for moms. I looked in school. I looked in my dancing world. I looked out anywhere outside of my own family, family friends. One of our family friends, one of the women in that group became like a second mom. It was her passing when I was 23. That's what started to trigger some of the memories when she passed away way too young because she had cancer. I think there's always been a part of me that really just loves being able to connect with people. And when you talk about that authenticity thing that you notice about me, that was not part of my existence until after I started talking about my abuse. I wore a mask. People used to say to me, "You always looked so happy. You always had such a free spirit about you." But I was dying inside. I was in so much pain. But those moments of being able to have a adult or somebody say to me, "I love you," or when somebody would hug me and I knew they meant it, or when a dance teacher would say to me, "If you want to succeed, you will." When I felt like somebody actually believed in me, I like ate those moments up. I absorbed them. I went to sleep with them. I wrote them in my brain. I could feel them in my heart. And I think that was part of what actually helped me to not end my life. And that's part now of why I love my life. I yesterday had a very difficult day. It was a very difficult day to be having feelings and flashbacks. But one of the things I texted to my friend who knows about my history was, "I am so glad that I am alive." So while I'm in pain and I'm having memories, I love being able to just sit in the theater and sing the songs and scream for the actors and recognize what they're going through on that stage. So I feel like I've learned how to do both at the same time, be genuine and present, but also manage the crazy making crap that comes with PTSD because flashbacks happen at any point. You don't have a way to control that. And once they happen, you have to figure out what to do with them.
A couple of things I heard there is um, uh, you have people you can reach out to, right? You talked about someone you can text, and which is really important. And also, you're continuing to get out there and do things. Um, did you did you have the thought that maybe seeing that show could possibly be triggering in any sense before you went
Knew it
there?
would be. I
You
knew it would
knew it
be.
would be.
But there's no way in hell you're going to stop me from going because first of all, I was supposed to see that show 2 years ago. This was 2 years to celebrate my 50th birthday as I'm getting ready to turn 52. So there's no way I'm not going. I love the theater, but as I'm driving into New York with my friend, I'm saying to myself, I talk to myself like, you recognize Botwin, you're probably going to have a lot of flashbacks. You do know that, right? And I say to myself, yeah, and so what are you going to do about it? So I decide as we're driving up, well, I'm with one of my closest friends in the whole world who watched me give birth to my little man 11 years ago. Um, I love the music. I know the word. Hamilton is on my playlist for 2 years now. So I don't know what it all means, but I certainly know I know the music. And I'm not letting, if something could be triggering, every day I go to work and I sit with another client, I think, well, this might be a difficult session, right?
Mhm.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to take care of yourself? Life is triggering. The news is so triggering right now. Having a child is triggering. I don't give a shit, to be honest with you. I would rather be triggered and work through it because triggers happen when we're ready to face them. If I couldn't handle what was going to come up for me yesterday, I wouldn't have gone. I used to cancel all the time on people. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm gonna be 52 years old. I can't keep missing out. So I think you can handle it, Botwin. Just keep going.
I want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Shari Botwin. Her second book is called Thriving After Trauma: Stories of Living and Healing, published by Roman and Littlefield. Let's just briefly or switch here to talk about the podcast Warrior Women Speak. And you're co-hosting that with Judge Rosemary Aquilina,
With
as in
another, yeah,
judge.
yeah.
She's like an actual judge.
She's the actual judge. She's the judge that sentenced Larry Nasser, the Olympic doctor,
Oh my gosh.
to, I already always forget how many years. So I say 10 lifetimes in prison. I don't remember the sentencing. So I reached out to her because I saw that she in her courtroom was allowing all the gymnasts, Ali Raisman, Simone Biles, there were 160 something of them who got to speak in the
Right.
courtroom. And when I saw that, I thought, I need to reach out to this woman because this is, I've never heard of this before. I attended the Cosby trial, and most of his alleged victims had no voice in that
Mm-hmm.
courtroom. So I felt inspired by her. So we connected. We both, she just came out with a book called Just Watch Me, which is her life story leading up to not so much the trial with Nasser, but her life before that.
Well,
And she and I have a lot in common. We both are very much about empowerment and advocacy and being heard. And we both have our own histories where we felt silenced and disrespected and abused and unheard. So we just started doing this podcast, and we
wait,
talk
wait, wait,
about
hold on, hold on. How did you just start doing this? What did you say? How did this evolve?
oh, maybe partly because of you. It might be partly your fault. So before I started this podcast with Judge Aquilina, I've been going on different podcasts. I love it. I think it's amazing. And I think one day we were talking, it's actually her fault because I didn't start this. She did. I think she said, we really should do a podcast. And I was like, uh, a podcast with a judge. But then I was like, how do you do, and what do I call her? But then once I listened to her book is on Audible, and that came out before her paperback. I thought, yeah, we really should. Let's do it. And we talk about everything. We talk about the war. We talk about managing triggers. We talked about burnout. So we don't just talk about trauma. We talk about life, and we talk about it pretty honestly and frankly.
Mm.
And it's been great. It's very, and maybe you understand this, being able to sit and talk with somebody, whether it's a different guest every week. In our situation, we just talk to each other. It really is very therapeutic. And um, we figure things out about our own lives as we talk with other people. And I think this is amazing. And you know what? We have fun. I don't know if you have fun doing your show. I mean, sometimes the technical stuff that we don't know what we're doing, we always figure it out without
Right.
asking our kids, which is pretty impressive that we can figure it out on our own. So there's this feeling of like, yo, we can do this.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
So
have a
it's
lot of
fun.
fun doing this, and I mean, for me, this is super inspiring. I mean, really, that's why I wanted you to come back here, because you just this lightning bolt of inspiration and empowerment, and you really are. Let me ask you something. When you and a lot of people, a lot of listeners love this question, and I want to ask you and get your response to this. When you first started, can you recall any kind of clinical errors you made, any kind of
Mhm.
mistakes you made?
Yeah. My clinical error when I first started was I was so upset about what happened to me, and I felt the need to go out and tell the world, which is a common theme with survivors. When you've been silent for so long and then you finally let yourself know your story, many of us want to go out and sort of scream on the top of the Eiffel Tower, listen to what was done to me. What happened was, in a professional conference, I decided to speak about being an incest survivor. I had only been in therapy 2 years, maybe. And what happened was, I would never I couldn't just go and talk like I am with you. I scripted the presentation out. I read it. As I read it, I was not present. I couldn't
Mm,
look at anybody. I didn't realize that it was a clinical error till after, because nothing bad happened in the workshop. I mean, people I know were empowered and I got good feedback, but I wasn't okay after. I went into what I would call a shame attack. And it lasted a few months. Because I was still trying to figure out, how do I confront my parents? My parents were in total denial about everything that had happened. I was disconnecting from people that I had been friends with because they didn't believe me. I felt suicidal. I felt alone. I thought, what's the point of all this? So when I did that, and then I went home that night, I remember thinking, well, now what am I supposed to do? I have to sit with all that. I just
Hmm.
wasn't ready. And I have been very careful clinically about how I self disclose, how I use self disclosure. So in that situation, I wasn't in a session, but I was sitting among colleagues, many of whom I never met before.
Hmm.
And I would never do that again. Occasionally, I have worked with people who feel the way I felt. They start uncovering and they want to go out and do what I did. And sometimes I tell them the story. I tell them,
Excuse me for interrupting, but
yeah,
why did you feel the need to share all of that? Was it because you had been in therapy and you were beginning to talk about your past, uncover your past, and you just wanted to get it out there? What was the reason for that? Your reason?
I think I was looking for validation from the outside to say to me, if you need to believe yourself. I used to always say to my therapist, I don't think you believe any of what I'm saying. So I think part of my drive for getting out there was I wanted people to come up to me after and say, I believe you. I never got to go to the police and report my crime. And I think as survivors, that need to feel heard and believed, at the time I didn't want to believe it. So instead
Hmm.
of working on trusting myself, because nobody was there during my abuse, only me and whoever was causing me harm. But when you're first uncovering abuse, many times clients say to me, there's no way that that could be true. Do you think I'm making it up? Do you think that I'm lying? So
Right.
that was part of my drive. I think I wanted those 300 people to come up to me after and say, I believe you.
Hmm.
And I know they heard me and I think they did believe me. But then I was like, that can't be true. There's no way that this could possibly be true. 22 years later, I can say to you, I am an incest survivor. I can talk about having a miscarriage on the stage, and I'm not going to end the podcast and go, well, should I have said that to Guy? Maybe I'm making that up. I've spent years and years working on knowing the truth, accepting the truth, grieving the truth, raging about the truth. So now I can stay in my body and I can stay connected to who I am, and I can manage it.
Yeah. To the newer therapists out there, um, what would you say to them in terms of guidance if they want to begin working with people who've been impacted by trauma? I mean, obviously, there's so many books out there and so many possible workshops, but what would you say to them?
I would say, well, good for you. I would say if you want to work with people who are in recovery from trauma, make sure you have a great support system. If you are somebody that's experienced trauma, I would say make sure you stay in therapy. Don't and again, occasionally I've worked with people who have said these things to me, and on a rare occasion I've had clients become very angry with me, and in some ways trying to think of how you would say this, rebel against my words of advice. And again, I know that's not about me, but what happens for people is if you throw yourself into this type of work without adequate support, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get sick, whether you get burned out, whether you get clinically depressed. And some of them would go off and be fine therapists. I'm not saying they couldn't do the work, but the work is not, you should not be doing the work at your own expense. That
Mhm.
would not be okay. You should not be doing any job at your own expense. And if somebody says to you, go with caution, don't take that personally. That's not your therapist saying that they don't think you can handle the work or do the work. They're saying this is really tough stuff. You need to be in a place where you know your own history and you understand your buttons and your triggers, more for you, not so much for your clients. It's not that I'm worried that my clients are going to go out and hurt people. I'm worried that they're going to get hurt in it. And so occasionally that's what I've seen happen.
Yeah. In terms of the different modalities out there and the different practitioners out there, are there people or specific modalities that speak to you that feel right for you?
I've not experienced or done things like EMDR. I've not done DBT, but I feel like for a lot of people, having a combination of DBT and EMDR, especially if you're someone that's stuck in a specific piece of your history, I feel that can be very helpful, especially for people who maybe went through something horrible that happened over the course of 6 months or a year. Somebody with a history like myself, which is over 20 years of trauma, I think doing things more like mindfulness, yoga, journaling, singing, drawing. For me, having a kid has been my modality, to be honest with you. And I know that's not a clinical term. That doesn't make any sense, but the healing that has happened in the 11 years of being a parent, that would be my recommendation. But EMDR and DBT are great strategies because the DBT really helps people learn how to contain, especially when they're feeling suicidal or like wanting to self-harm. The EMDR can be very helpful for people stuck in specific parts of the shame or the rage that came from the outside onto them. But I think it's a very individualized case. I think it goes case by case, person to person.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. And having talked to a lot of people, oftentimes I get off of these calls, and not very often, but when I do, there are moments when I get off and I'm like, I would love that person to be my therapist. And Shari, you're someone I would love to have as my therapist. You just have this, you're so friggin' compassionate, and I could just see how you exude that and emanate that. And you're incredible. You really are. You're amazing. And I'm so glad you're on this podcast. Anytime you want to come back on this podcast, you email me and say, Guy, let's do it. I want to talk about X, Y, or Z. Love it. Love having you on here, Shari.
I love coming on your show. And I think that you've offered so many gifts to so many people. And that, I know that your advocacy for people with PTSD is very heartfelt. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. And I think you should keep doing this podcast as long as you want.
I appreciate
Or as
that.
long as you can, I guess.
As long as I can.
As long as technology is working and you know what you're doing over there, which you clearly do.
What's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Shari?
Oh my goodness. I love when people ask me this. Do you mean my social media handles, which I know what that means now for all you teenagers or young kids out there? I think the best way to find me is just to look for me on my website, which is just my name. It's www.sharibotwin.com. That's the best way to look for me.
Okay. ShariBotwin.com. Again, the book is called Thriving After Trauma, Stories of Living and Healing. The podcast with Judge Aquilina is called Warrior Women Speak. And awesome. Looking forward to hearing that. Shari, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.